If you love wisdom, put your mind up to the ceiling. Don't let it stay in the gutter. Don't let your heart get all cluttered. No, I did not stutter. Listen to all that I've muttered. Your life will only go well if you in wisdom or lovers.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside. Come inside.
The truth will surely rescue you and I.
You and I. You and I.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside.
The truth will surely rescue you and I.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is your host, JC Johnson, and you are listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And you know you're listening on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. We got an awesome show for you today. Today we are discussing the wisdom of ability. And I have a special guest who's going to be calling in from Maryland by the name of Ricardo Andrews. You don't want to miss it. We're going to be talking about ability. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside.
Hey, what's going on, Wisdom family? Each week on For the Love of Wisdom, we promote a new and free audiobook that we believe you will benefit from and become wiser by listening to. On today's show, we're talking about the wisdom of ability. And so, the recommended book for this week is Be Different by John Elder Robinson. This book is about how a person having an intellectual disability doesn't mean that they're sick, but just different. To download this free book today, just visit audibletrial.com/lovewisdom. Audible is spelled AUDIBLE, so that's audibletrial.com/lovewisdom.
This is your girl, Juicy Jazzo, and I wanted to let you know I'm all about wisdom. Knowledge is power, power is money, and money makes the world go round. And you're listening to For the Love of Wisdom right now, bleeding out your speakers.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the underground starts with you. All right, so if you're just tuning in, before the break, I said that today we're discussing the wisdom of ability, right? So every week we pick a new topic. As you can see, I don't know if you're paying attention, but each show title ends with the suffix ity. It's a, cool little word trick, it's something I like to do as the episodes progress, as we get further into the future. Then we'll switch it up. Maybe we'll have either a different prefix or a different suffix. It's all in fun, and it's all just to help us learn. So if you're new to the show, we get the show title from the word philosophy, because the word philosophy literally means love of wisdom. The first part of it, philo, means love, and the second part of that word, sophos, means wisdom. And so that's what we're discussing every week. And last week on For the Love of Wisdom, we discussed the most powerful force on earth, at least I think so, and that is procreativity, or just the act of creating a family and the wisdom behind that. So we talked about the definition of family, which is the basic unit in society, traditionally consisting of two parents. That's what it traditionally is, two parents rearing their children. And then we went on to discuss how taking care of children is, not just feeding them and changing their diapers, but of course that's part of it too. But it's also about, teaching them right versus wrong, playing with them, teaching them life skills, encouraging the development of their natural skills, their talents, their abilities, everything like that, so that they can discover really who they want to be in life, and to be able to use those abilities to become self-sufficient eventually. That's the purpose of child rearing, right? And not everybody believes in family or even sees the importance of it, but that's why we discussed it last time. We discussed that for 2 hours. So that was actually within 2 different episodes. So if you missed those 2 episodes, don't worry about it. It's not too late, because they are available for free download. You can get that. You can look up For the Love of Wisdom on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, or Google Play Music. So depending on whether you got an iPhone, an Android, a Mac computer, a Dell, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's different ways to listen to the show if you miss it. So you can just go online and look up For the Love of Wisdom, and just continue listening on your favorite podcast platform. And also, if you want to join today's conversation about the wisdom of ability, or you want to contribute to previous conversations, you can just hit me up on Twitter, and the Twitter handle is @LoveWisePodcast. That's @LoveWisePodcast. And in your response, just make sure that you use the hashtag For the Love of Wisdom. And also you can do the hashtag North Coast Underground or hashtag NCU Radio. All right, so today we're going to focus on a topic that is, I think it's definitely underrepresented, but it's absolutely essential, and it's becoming more and more important as days goes on. All right, so today we are talking about the wisdom of ability. All right, what does that mean? Well, according to the Oxford Dictionary, the word ability means possession of the means or skills to do something. All right, so it's very important that we remember that. Also, it means talent, skill, or proficiency in a particular area. All right, so that's from the Oxford Dictionary. And then I also found a definition on dictionary.com. It has a great definition as well, and it says that ability is talent that denotes qualifications or powers, right? So ability is a general word for power, and that's very important. Think about that. Power, right? So it's a word for power, native or acquired, right? So it means you're either born with it or it's something that you get in time, that enables one to do things well, right? So just for example, a person with ability, that person has power. They're a person of great ability. And the other definition that they had was faculty that denotes a natural ability for a particular kind of action. All right, so the focus of today, we're actually going to be talking about individuals who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And this is a topic that is definitely very close to me. That's something that I do. I work in the field with individuals who have disabilities. And one thing I want to focus on is not their disabilities, but really focusing on their abilities, right? Because that's what it's all about. And one great way to do that, I think, is to highlight the book of the week. So if you heard the clip earlier, the book of the week this week is a book by a guy by the name of John Elder Robinson, and his book is called Be Different. And this is an awesome book. I read one of his other books before this one, and it led me to want to check this one out. But he's a guy who he actually has autism, but he talks about all the great things that he's done in his life despite that. Okay, so check this out. Here are some quotes from the book that really stood out to me. One thing he said was, I was amazed to learn that Asperger's was a type of autism, because I always thought that everyone with autism was completely disabled, right? So this guy, he has, Asperger's specifically, which is on the autism spectrum, right? And he says that Asperger's is not a terminal illness. You're not sick at all. You're just different. And I think that that's pretty powerful, and it's something that we need to keep in mind whenever we see somebody, whether they have Down syndrome or autism or Prader-Willi syndrome or anything, even a developmental disability, something muscular dystrophy or anything like that. Sometimes we make a judgment about people without even knowing them, but we have no idea, because we're focusing so much on their disabilities that we overlook all of the great abilities that they have. And that's what we're discussing today, the wisdom of ability. Here's another quote from the book that stood out to me. He said, later, with the benefit of this new knowledge, because he found out, later in life that he had autism. He didn't know that from when he was young. He didn't find out until he was 40 years old, right? So he said, later, with the benefit of this new knowledge, I studied my Aspergian son, who is now 21 years old, and thought about how he used to struggle in school and in social settings. He was diagnosed when he was 16, 24 years earlier than me. So he was just saying that, his son actually also has the same thing, but he found out much earlier in life. And he just talks about how that was very helpful to him. and how basically he won't have to go through some of the challenges that he went through, because now he can do something about it a little bit earlier on. And this quote right here I thought was really, really important, where he said, autism in its many forms is not a disease. It's a way of being that comes from this non-standard wiring in the brain. Okay, so that's important too. As we were talking about before, a person with an intellectual disability, it doesn't mean that they're sick or that there's something wrong with them. All it means is that it's just something different about them. God created them in a different way, maybe than you or me, but that doesn't mean that anything is wrong. Another thing he said in the book, he said the hardest thing about having Asperger's is that we don't look any different from anyone else on the outside, right? So consequently, society wrote him off as defective, along with millions of other people that were like him, right? But he says his strange behavior was described as bad instead of being seen for what it was, the innocent result of a neurological difference. And then this one was really interesting to me. He said it's a way of being, not a disease. Bill Gates is said to have Asperger's, along with scientist Albert Einstein, actor Dan Aykroyd, and movie director Alfred Hitchcock. As adults, none of these people would be described as disabled, but they were certainly eccentric and different. If everyone with Asperger's achieved a high level of success, no one would call it a disability. Unfortunately, those people are the exception and not the rule. Very interesting. We'll be right back after this with more. Shout out to everybody showing me love on Facebook. Today's my birthday, not just Flag Day. Thank you all.
Hey, what's up? It's your girl Queen Z from the Queen Z Show, and you are listening to For the Love of Wisdom.
All right, welcome back to For the Love of Wisdom. This is your host, JC Johnson, and I'm here with a special guest today. We got Ricardo Andrews from Maryland. What's going on, Ricardo?
Hey, good afternoon, Jason.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that you were able to join us today.
Yeah, I'm glad I could be here.
Right. So, today's episode is focusing on the wisdom of ability, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when we think of, individuals who have intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities, and we focus on that disability part, but today we're really trying to bring awareness to the abilities that people have, focusing on how people don't have the limitations that we might think, and that they're actually able to do a lot of great things. So
right,
I know that you have a lot of experience in the field, and so that's why I'm glad that you were able to share with us today some of your insights.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you were able to invite me, because I think, to your point, there are a lot of misconceptions about people with disabilities, and to your point, abilities versus the disability itself. I think we kind of have to think a tad differently, because we do a great disservice to people in general when we put these preconceived notions on them.
Right. Just to give our listeners an idea, tell me a little bit about yourself, like where you're originally from.
Sure. So I'm from Greenbelt, Maryland. It's a small town about 20 minutes from Washington, D.C. area. Grew up around there primarily, relatively all my life, and kind of got an idea of working with people more so in high school. I went to Eleanor Roosevelt, which is also located in Greenbelt, Maryland, and when transition into college as well, to kind of focus more on counseling. And in that pursuit, I kind of understood the importance of truly taking an individualized approach and a very mindful approach when working with people, regardless of whichever field you work in, and how sometimes talking to people and the words that you use can affect someone in their path and their own individual journeys. And so I found myself in this field because it's funny. I actually networked, and so I think after graduating college, everyone's faced with that question: well, what do I do now?
Right.
And so after applying for a few jobs left and right and not receiving responses, randomly, this was also around the Super Bowl time where I went over one of my uncle's houses for the Super Bowl party. I had a cousin who worked within this field of supporting people with disabilities and said, hey, I think with your background, expertise, and prior experience, you'll be a good fit. So me, first of all, unemployed, trying to find employment, and secondly, open to new experiences. I tried it, and I think it's kind of been like a match ever since. I've been with Seek for about 6 years now. And I've had a few roles, so I think, I think it was kind of like that pathway towards, person-centeredness and this counseling-related route that I took. It kind of got me here right now.
Right. So person-centered is terminology that's used pretty frequently in
Sure.
this field. But for those people who are not familiar with that. Can you explain that a little bit? Like, what does person-centered mean exactly?
Sure. So if you think about, how people are in groups naturally with their friends, with their families, with their colleagues. And so if you're going out to a restaurant and the group itself may decide, hey, we want, we all want, noodles or some type of meal. Well, regardless of your individual choice and your own appetite and your specific needs and wants, you're getting what the group gets. Right. And so person-centered does the exact opposite. It understands the specific skills, needs, and abilities and wants from each person. And so you may go to a restaurant, you may go to a KFC, you may not want a 3-piece and a biscuit. You may want, shrimp crawfish, for instance. Right. And so in the field of people with disabilities, when you support them in employment, in community living, in the day program, you're individualizing that service to them. You're understanding their needs. So if someone doesn't prefer to be outside during hot weather because of medical reasons or because of personal preference, you're being very creative in how you provide that service. And so while you may work with someone out in the field who enjoys going outside, when you work with this gentleman or this woman, it may be that you find an indoor activity during that time in which you work with this person. And so person-centered is I guess, semantics-wise, is mainly working with a person the way he or she wants you to work with them, using an individualized approach to meet their needs instead of someone else's needs.
Right. So basically, you can't just say, well, yeah, I'm going to take Bob to KFC because people with Down syndrome like chicken. Right.
Yeah, and I would say people like chicken in general, but doesn't mean I want chicken when you want chicken.
Right. Exactly. It's like,
Right.
So we can't just say, because sometimes people do think, all people who are autistic are like this, or people who have Down syndrome, they act like this, say these kind of things, and sometimes there may be similarities between people and everything, but yeah, right. Definitely everyone is an individual. And everyone has different likes, preferences, and yeah, we have to be mindful of that. And so I know that you've been able to, use that philosophy, the person-centered philosophy. So before the break, you were, telling me a little bit about your role as an employment consultant and then a lead employment consultant within Seek. And for those of you that don't know, Seek is an agency that's located in it's based out of Silver Spring, Maryland, but they work all throughout Montgomery County, Maryland, and DC as well, right? With
That's correct.
Yeah, and they have a lot of different connections with different agencies, with schools, and they're doing a lot of really good things. And I'm glad that Ricardo was able to join with us today and kind of share about a little bit of what's going on at Seek. because there's a lot of people that aren't familiar with these kind of agencies. Maybe they see somebody like that somewhere at a restaurant or on the street, but they don't really know too much about what's going on with them, the services that they receive, or even if they receive services at all.
And I was going to say, I'd just jump in. I was going to say, and there are, what I've found personally, I found two different routes that some people may take. And so to your point, some people may choose to receive services and going to an organization that can support them in finding employment, support them in finding housing supports or housing in general, support them in developing real relationships, real rich relationships out in the community, while also attending and participating in activities and things of interest to each person. And so while some may take that route, some others may take more of a individual approach too as well, and say, maybe I'm not interested in service. And so there are many vocational rehabilitation centers located throughout the nation and focus on people with disabilities as well. I think the difference is more of what the approach is for each person, what each person desires. With these voc rehabilitation centers, they're more so focused on these American Job Centers. They're more so focused on short-term support in assisting a person identify employment and accommodations as such. And some people may receive services as a private pay, on a private pay basis. There's an avenue within many states that allow each person to control their own budget. And so he or she may say, hey, I may not want to be directly connected to an organization, but I'll use the funds that my state has provided me in order to find the right professional, in order to find the right resources, in order to find the things that I need that's important to me. So while everyone may not be connected to an organization or manage their own budget, there are many routes in which a person with disability can be serviced.
Thank you, Ricardo. We're going to get into that a little bit more after the break. You are listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And of course, you're listening on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. We'll be right back after this.
It's your boy, Tear It Up, Tommy Tom from Beyond Sports, and you're listening to For the Love of Wisdom
with your host, Jason Johnson.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You are listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets, and you're listening on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. I'm here today with special guest Ricardo Andrews. What's going on, Ricardo?
Hey, I'm good.
For those who are just tuning in, we were talking about how being person-centered is really important. And can you briefly just summarize, what does it mean to be person-centered in our approach to people? Sure.
And just to summarize, I think it's just that, it's being person-centered. It's all in the wording. It's being very mindful of the individual qualities of each person. Of course, it's deeper than that, but just to briefly kind of go over it.
I work in this field as well, and I know that there's a lot of people who, the individuals that we do work with, it can be easy to just say, you know what, I really don't have time to sit here and let this person explain to me exactly what they want to do, or maybe I have a hard time understanding them because of their speech or something like that. So you say, you know what, let me just make this simple, and I'm gonna say, hey, since I want to go to the mall today because I need to go and get those new Jordans, I think you want to go to the mall today too, right? Yeah, right. All right, yeah, let's go.
Right.
But it shouldn't work like that. It should be, hey, what would you like to do today, or hey, what kind of job would you like?
Exactly. And I think that's detrimental at the end of the day, because you do a disservice to that person, whether if it's going out in the community, finding a career, understanding what living on your own looks like, understanding cooking skills. One of the biggest things that I learned in educational psychology is the way people learn. And one of the most important ways a person learns is understanding new information in the context of information that they already know. And so now, if I'm interested in cooking, I don't know, rice and beans, because with my parents, I cooked rice and beans. But I may have done 20% of it, but now I want to actually learn how to prepare a meal. Now, if you decide to say, no, we're going to cook pizza, that learning is kind of thrown to the side. It's postponed. And it's also potentially a lack of interest in that specific, approach too. And saying, hey, I'm interested in pizza, but you may want to cook rice and beans. The person themselves may not be interested. You may wonder as a professional, hey, why is this person, not as interested about cooking? They were when I last spoke with them. Well, that's because you weren't being very considerate of their individual needs. You projected onto what you wanted onto this person. And if that's happened to anyone, which I'm sure it's happened to any and all of our listeners, it doesn't feel good when someone tells you what to do based on their own needs and their own biases, when they're supposed to be helping you. And that's like going to, I don't know, a mentor or someone who you confide in or trust, and them telling you advice or giving you feedback only to fit their own needs. It's not to help you at the end of the day. And that's never a good feeling when the people that you trust and work very closely to take advantage of you in that sense.
Exactly. And so when it comes to working with individuals, I know that you specialize in the employment aspect of it. So tell me a little bit about that. How do you assist individuals through employment opportunities?
Sure. So I recently, as of last month, actually just transitioned into a new role with the organization. This is called Seek. We're in Silver Spring, Maryland. We're a nonprofit, community-based organization that focuses on person-centered needs. And so what that means is instead of the traditional model that people may be familiar with within group homes and day programs where you have one professional with 6 or 7 people, and you're in a building. We're community-based because we believe that community starts with each person individually. You don't take someone from 20 miles from where they currently live and try to develop real relationships, real networks, because that's not where they shop. That's not where they get their hair cut. That's not where they frequent. And to develop and hone those relationships also build social capital. So that's kind of a quick snippet of what Seek does. My role within the past 6 roles was more so in the employment side. And so I actually started with Seek in 2012. Yes, that's right. In 2012 as an employment consultant. Had a caseload where I worked with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities find work. Those who were unemployed, who didn't necessarily understand the dynamics or the idea of work, what that meant, the value of money, and kind of how those two tied into one another. I worked with individuals that were underemployed, that had a job but may have offered them limited but little hours, that were looking for additional work. Those who were employed and may have needed follow-up assistance, retention supports that can range from assistive technology to accommodations to general conversations towards problem solving with employers and the employer itself, and also team members and people that were trying to understand this idea of work is something that they're interested in. And so working with the caseload, you work very closely with families as well, in teams that really help you understand what not only person-centered supports are, but what employment supports are for people with disabilities. A lot of times, one of the most important pieces is setting the expectation early on that a person can do, a person can achieve, a person can accomplish goals. Because one of the hardest challenges that I faced was when that wasn't set from parents, from peers, from coworkers, from family members, from circles of support. Then the person once engaging or interested or pursuing work came to play. It was a tad difficult. It was a huge learning curve. It was, oh, well, wait a minute. Now I have to meet expectations. Now I have to be somewhere. Now I have to clock in and clock out. And when you realize that people all of their lives have been told what they can't do, it's a tad hard to instill this work ethic or assist a person understand that they have this ability to achieve.
What was the difference between the employment consultant role and the lead employment consultant role?
Sure. So I think, again, while I still had a caseload to manage, I was also helping mentor and train my other colleagues. And so that looked like if someone was just coming on board, I would kind of create a system and a training for he or she to understand what is working with people with disabilities in the employment life mean. What does that look like? Sometimes what happens is because this position attracts younger talents, sometimes there is a learning curve that kind of needs to be addressed, whether it's the technical knowledge of the skill set itself and how you network and engage employers and how you use certain terminology, jargon, in order to connect and build relationships to that of the basic knowledge of what does it mean to work with a person with disability? What does it mean to challenge your own biases and preconceived notions about a person? One of the things that's very challenging is that as a consultant, not only understanding the skill sets and contributions that a person has, you're also charged with going out and speak with employers and networking and not just, knocking on doors and doing cold calls, but also networking and going to events and figuring out how to creatively identify warm leads, because one of the things we know, disability or not, is that about 75 to 80% of the time where people find jobs, it's through a warm lead, it's through a network, it's through a contact. Kind of reiterates that notion that it's not what you know, it's who you know. Right. And so a lot of times within this field, sometimes that's overlooked because the population we work with. I think we come from perspective or a side where we don't always think towards this person having a network or their family members having a network. And that's one of those hurdles we always have to jump over just to kind of help everybody understand that it's not solely disability that you need to focus on. You need to understand that people have this social capital. Kind of teaching those notions to younger and professionals was what I was tasked with, and I loved it. It was training and mentoring role that eventually led me to my prior position as a program manager, in which I focused more on the recruitment effort.
We're actually, I really do want to hear more about your new role, and I'm sure the listeners will as well. We're about to go into a quick commercial break, and we're going to play a couple of songs, but we will be right back. After this, you are listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. We'll be right back after this.
Hey everybody, you're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets.
With your host, Jason Johnson.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. You are listening to For the Love of Wisdom on northcoastunderground.com, where the underground starts with you. All right, so we're going to just take a break for a moment. Ricardo's still hanging out with us if you were listening before the break. But real quick, I wanted to go over a few facts relating to the industry that assists individuals who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. Real quick, I did want to share a little story though. Earlier today, as I mentioned, today is my birthday, and I went to Denny's with my wife because at Denny's, I don't know if you know this, but if it's your birthday, you actually get a free meal, right? So I was just joking with her, maybe halfway joking, but I was just saying, I think I need to go to a different Denny's, maybe one or two other ones later on in the day and really get the most out of it. Now, before you judge me, don't act like you've never thought of it yourself, right? I mean, hey, why not? But hey, if you're from Denny's, don't worry. I'm only joking, well, partially. We'll see. But I want to take a look at something that's coming up pretty soon. It is the APSE conference. All right, and APSE, the website apse.org, APSE supports Employment First to facilitate the full inclusion of people with disabilities in the workplace and the community, right? And they actually have an event coming up on June 26th, and this is an event where they help people that work with individuals who have intellectual disabilities to basically help them to be more effective in what they do. And the event is going to be at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort in Lake Buena Vista, Florida, right? So if you're in that area, definitely check it out. Or if you just want to take a vacation, it'd be a great place to go to. You know, you can check out Disney while you're there. And the event, you know, basically focuses on, as I mentioned, employment first. So that means employment in the general workforce should be the first and preferred option for individuals with disabilities, because as we'll discuss a little bit later with Ricardo, you know, it's very important that we see the importance of an individual with the intellectual disability having the opportunity to work, right? Just because, I mean, hey, that's what me and you do. We work, right? Because we need money. So employment first, according to APSE, simply put, is real jobs, real wages, right? And employment in the general workforce means regular jobs like everyone else in society. So in typical work settings, working side by side with people without disabilities, right? So it's not just, you know, them going to a place which is, you know, called a sheltered workshop or somewhere where there's only other individuals that have intellectual disabilities. This is actually a place where they can go, where they can be in the most inclusive setting. And, you know, by inclusive, that means that they're working just with your everyday average person, not just people with disabilities, right? Because that is a part of normalcy. You know, we have normalcy like that, and so they should have that as well. It's very important. And so that's one thing that they're really focusing on. Most agencies that provide services to people with intellectual disabilities also have the same goal, right? So that's really important. Be on the lookout for that. If you're able to travel to Florida, or if you're already in that area, it's going to be a great conference. I wish I could go, but I'm not going to be able to make it this year. But, you know, there is something more local. If you live in Ohio, there is an organization called Ohio Provider Resource Association. Most people just call them OPRA, okay? And no, there's not going to be any singing there. Well, you know what? Actually, I take that back, because they do a lot of singing there. They actually have their own theme songs, and they do marches and different stuff. It's actually pretty fun. I went to the conference, one of the conferences they had in 2016, and I attended one in 2017 as well. They were awesome. I definitely learned a lot from that. It was a great networking opportunity. So if you work with individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, this is something that you may want to check out. So here's a little bit of information about the Ohio Provider Resource Association, or OPRA. As a statewide association of service providers, OPRA is a leader in efforts to collaboratively build a statewide service system that meets the needs of its ultimate customers. So people from Ohio who have developmental disabilities, that is their customer base right there. So currently, OPRA's membership consists of more than 150 organizations, both for-profit and not-for-profit, providing services to more than 15,000 people in Ohio who have developmental disabilities. And that's a lot. That's a lot. So it looks like they're definitely doing some awesome things. There's a lot of organizations in the Ohio area, specifically where we are here in the Northeast Ohio area, but all over, you know, even as far as Columbus, Toledo, anywhere that you can think of in Ohio, there are organizations that are providing these services, and these services are very much needed. And I'm glad that they're around and that they exist. So before we get back on the phone with Ricardo, who's still hanging out with us, just wanted to remind everyone, if you want to join the conversation you can hit me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @LoveWisePodcast. And, you know, if you want to contribute to the conversation, you want to just comment on something that we're talking about, you can definitely send me a message. Make sure that you put the hashtag For the Love of Wisdom so that we know that you're referencing to that. And also put the hashtag NCU Radio or North Coast Underground. And so that we can all be connected on there. It's definitely an awesome conversation. Today we are talking about the wisdom of ability, right? So people who have disabilities, we don't want to just focus on the fact that they have a disability. We really want to focus on their abilities because they do have awesome abilities just like you and me. More on that after the break.
Knowledge is power, power is money, and money makes the world go round.
Money, power, respect, I get it higher, learning, yeah, I'm winning. Only get better with time, keep got on my mind with wisdom, there's no limit. There's no limit, get up and get it. Can achieve the impossible, conquer every obstacle. Exhausted from grinding, constantly pushing, do what they say I could. Life is what you make it. Knowledge is power, don't let them take it.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside. Come inside.
The truth will surely rescue you and I.
You and I. You and I.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside. Come inside.
The truth will surely rescue you